Hello and welcome to Gardening at 58 North. So in this video I'd like to show you how I set up my hydroponic system. So I wouldn't call myself a hydroponic expert, so I'm not doing this as a how-to video, I'm just doing it more to show you how I do it personally. I do have quite a bit of experience with hydroponics though, because I've grown it previously and I also studied it briefly at university as well. So this is basically the end result of my last batch of hydroponics. This was actually growing for several months and I was getting a huge amount of yield from this. So it's known as Japanese spinach. This is what it looks like when it's a bit healthier. And I'll be growing this again. This has done really well, didn't go to seed at all. It's been growing really vigorously and it was just throwing out loads of healthy shoots. The reason it's died down is we got an attack of aphids, an attack of thrips and an attack of caterpillars all at the same time. So you can see the caterpillars have stripped some of the leaves off here. The aphids have just damaged some of the leaves in general, and the thrips as well were damaging the leaves. One or two plants survived and they've been throwing out some leaves, even though I haven't actually been adding any more feed to this for a while. But it's time to give up on these plants, plant some new ones. These are really old plants. You can actually see from the base actually. So you can see from this one, for example, it's got a big kind of stocky root there. That's basically the base of the plant. Keeps throwing out new leaves, and as I pick the leaves it keeps growing a thicker and thicker stem. And if you know cabbages, they don't generally have a very thick stem until they're quite old and mature. So these are well past it. They need to be replaced, and I'll be replacing them with the same plants. The reason being, I'm using my grow box for my other plants at the moment that are more tropical. My conservatory is quite cold. It's still February. Currently -5 outside and it's only about 10 degrees Celsius in this conservatory. So I need a crop that can handle lower light levels and also cold temperatures, and this will do perfectly for that. So the first thing I need to do is clear out the hydroponic system, give it a clean, make sure it's sterilized. I don't want any kind of diseases that might have been in this batch then be passed on to the new batch, and also any aphids or anything like that. So the type of hydroponics this is called a nutrient film technique. It's basically what you have is the plants kind of held in place with this plastic frame. This isn't completely necessary, but this just stops the plants from moving around and gives them some stability. They're not in soil, they're not in any kind of gravel substrate, so they need something to hold them up. And the plants themselves are planted in rock wool, and there's various sizes. I've just been using the very small ones because I've just been growing salad crops. But that gives them the structure. Then what happens is I have a pump which pumps up water and aerates it. It then comes through here, through this pipe. It then runs over. You can see there's a massive amount of roots at the moment. But of course, originally it wouldn't have been like that. What you've got to do with a nutrient film technique is you've got to set up a gentle gradient. So you've got a constant layer of water in here, but quite a thin layer of water with a good flow. You've got to get the right balance. You really need to check your levels. So basically if it's too steep, the water runs too fast, it's not thick enough for the plants to get enough water around the roots, or it's too fast that the roots get damaged. But if you don't have it steep enough and it's too shallow, you'll get areas which kind of puddle and you won't get any flow in that area, and you'll run out of nutrients and oxygen in those sections. So you need a good amount of flow, but just not too much. And the nutrient film technique, it's quite a good midway between all the different hydroponic systems. So you could have a very simple system like the Kratky method, where you just have basically a big tub of water, fill it up once and let it slowly go down as the plant uses it. That doesn't need any moving parts or electronics. This system is somewhere in the middle. You can get very advanced systems such as aerohydroponics, which is just misting it or spraying water on the roots. They are much more intensive. But this system is a good halfway medium. So basically I've got electric pump which keeps the water aerated and pumping the solutions around. But the thing that makes this nice and simple is the big reservoir in the bottom. So I'll take this top bit off so I can show you the reservoir. So this here is the reservoir. The handy thing with having a reservoir is it's a huge buffer, so you can leave this a few days and the plants are going to be absolutely fine. There's lots of water in here, they're not going to suddenly run out of water. Also, having a large amount of water makes it easier to balance the nutrients and the pH, and that's very important with hydroponics. So because there's a lot of water, the pH and the nutrients, that doesn't change too quickly. You still need to check it probably at least once a week, but it's not going to be a rapid change, whereas some of the other systems, if it's a small amount of water, you really need to be checking that every single day. Sometimes more than once a day if it's a really delicate system. But this system, it's a lot easier because of that. And as I say, you don't have to worry about it if it's about a week or so. This has probably got about 20-30 litres of water once it's filled up. And so that allows me to not worry about this for at least a week. I can just top it up once a week. And as I say, it just has a small pump. So this is the water pump here. Basically just comes out of that nozzle, gets pumped into the top of the system. It's also got a little hose here which draws in just air from outside and just adds some bubbles to the water just to help it be a bit more oxygenated and aerated. So that's all that this has really got. Very simple setup. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to empty this water out, get rid of all these roots that are in here. Although the roots have grown down into this bottom tank, the main place the roots are, as you probably saw from that bundle of roots, is mainly on the top. It's nutrient film that's the best place for the roots to grow. That thin layer of water has lots of surface area, allows great oxygenation, great root growth. Here in the tank, because the water is quite well oxygenated, the roots have also grown well, but this isn't the prime place you really want the roots. You want them on that thin film of water in the nutrient film technique kind of slanted section. So I'll clean this out now and I'll come back to you with everything clean and sterilised, ready for planting. So I've now cleaned and sterilised everything. I washed it first with soap and water, then rinsed all the soap off, then I used a sterilising wipe and then rinsed off any kind of residue that might have left. And I've also changed the filter in the pump. So what I'm going to do is put the pump in. It kind of slots in this hole here, and just suction cup it down to the ground. There's also a little slot for the cable, so I'm just going to put that through here. Now what I need to do now is start filling it up with solution. So I'm just going to use tap water for this. It depends where you are in the world, but tap water is normally okay. If you've got incredibly high chlorine levels or some kind of treatment that they've done to the tap water, you might need to get distilled water, but mine here in Scotland is pretty good water, so I don't need to worry. What you do need to know about though is the pH of your water. So you can use a pH meter or you can use pH paper. I've got a small electric pH meter here. Mine is normally a little bit alkaline, even though in Scotland it should be acidic. I think the water processing plant probably adds something to make it alkaline. So you can see there 7.9 on the pH level, 7's neutral, so that's pretty good. It's just slightly alkaline, and to be honest, most brassicas, and this plant is a type of brassica, like it slightly alkaline, so I'm happy with that. But you do need to keep that into consideration, and you also need to take into consideration the salt levels or dissolved mineral levels in your water. So I've got electroconductivity meter here, and this basically measures how many dissolved salts are in the water. So I'll just turn that on. I like to do it in parts per million. I just find it a bit easier, but you can also do it. It depends on your one. Mine's also got mine's also got a different type of measurement, but I prefer parts per million. Just going to put it in there. It varies on mine. Sometimes it's as high as 200. Today it looks like it's particularly good quality. It's only at 75 parts per million, so very little salt and residue in there. In the summer we had a drought and it did actually go up to about 200. It depends how many things are upstream of your water system. If you've got a lot of farms with animals or fertilizing fields, you can get quite a lot higher salt levels. Or if you're in an arid country which uses groundwater, the salt levels can be quite high. So that's an important factor. So the next thing is you want to get your nutrient solutions. My nutrient solutions just came with my grow box. Most hydroponic solutions come in 2 parts. Some of them come in 3 parts. Other ones just in 1. So these are just the ones that came with mine. So you need to add them separately. If the two are mixed together, the chemicals in them can interact and the plants can't absorb them as well. So I can check on the instructions here how much I need per litre and take into consideration how much salt I have in my water. My water is very, very pure at the moment, so I don't need to worry about that. Also, most hydroponic solutions are pH neutral, so they shouldn't change the pH, but you should always test the pH after you've added some nutrients just to make sure that it is neutral. And certainly as the plants grow, the pH will go up and down and change quite a bit. So when it comes to the feed levels, I want to keep mine really quite low because these are seedlings. Once they've germinated and they're growing quite well, I'll then up it to about 800 parts per million. That works quite well for leafy plants. At least in my experience it has. But basically just look online. Every plant likes different nutrient levels. Generally leafy plants like it a bit lower, but you've got things like tomatoes and peppers which might like much higher feed levels, and so they might need over 1,000 parts per million. But I'm going to go for 800 parts per million once this is mature. For now I'm just going to go for about 200 or 300 parts per million because that's a good level for a young plant. So it reckons on mine. Now with a lot of hydroponic systems they are listed in large measurements because they're expecting you to do it commercially. So this, for example, says per 100 litres used between 250 and 350 millilitres. So I'm just going to divide everything by 100, and per litre I'm going to add the lower section, probably about 25, but actually I think I'm going to go even lower because it's seedlings. Just going to put 2 ml solution per litre, and I know this is about 6 litres, so I can just times 2 by 6 and put 12 ml of each solution in that. So if it's small amounts, I have a pipette that I use for things like that. If it's larger amounts, I do actually have a measuring cup, which I can go up to about 80 milliliters, something like that. Makes it a bit easier, especially when you're doing it for the first time and you're getting a lot of chemicals put in. Now in between, you do want to rinse out the container because you don't want the two solutions to ever mix in a concentrated form, and you want to make sure that they are well mixed once you put them in the water before you put the next one in, because if the two solutions mix together and in a concentrated form, they can interact and it just reduces how much the nutrients are available to the plants. Also on your nutrients, it'll also say an optimum pH often that the plants should be at for that particular nutrient mix. This nutrient mix, the optimum pH is slightly acidic, and that's the same with most plants. Most plants do better in a slightly acidic nutrient mix. This one, because I'm growing brassicas, I'm actually just going to leave it slightly alkaline or neutral. I'm not going to play around too much with the pH unless it is well off. If it's a long way off neutral, then I will amend it. So I just want to give that a good stir and probably leave it for a few minutes as well, just to stabilize. Just because the two mixes are slightly different chemically, they can interact slightly, so it's good just to leave them a few minutes to chemically interact. That will give you a better reading on the pH. So what I like to do is add a bit less than what they say, and then just regularly test the water as I do this, maybe adding just a few milliliters at a time, see how it does. So we'll see. This was, I think it was at 76 last time. Now with the chemicals added, we're up to 400, so I would definitely say that's fine for the for now. I'll need to double that when it comes to the growing stage. Ideally, I might actually water this down just very slightly whilst you're in the seedling stage. But 400 parts per million, that's not a problem. Should be okay, but I'll just have to keep an eye on the plants. I'll probably just water it down slightly. I'll check with the pH. The pH will probably have changed slightly, and it will probably change again. So you can see there, it's become more acidic. Definitely shooting up. So I think it was around 7.98 before. Now it's right up to 4.5. So that's far too acidic. I need to get that down to around about 7. So now what I need to do is get some pH solution and change the pH. pH always goes up and down with hydroponics, so you need to get 2 tubs of pH solution. One should be one that raises the pH. It's a bit counterintuitive because when you raise the pH, you're actually lowering the acidity. The higher the number, the more alkaline, the less acidic. So it can be a bit confusing when you're first starting to learn about it, but basically this raises that number, pH up, and then I've got pH down, so that will lower the number. So because the number is too low already, I need to raise it. This stuff is incredibly concentrated. It's quite nasty actually, so you definitely want to make sure you don't get any of this on your skin, and you only want to add it in very small amounts at a time. So I'm just going to be using the pipette and slowly adding it and see how the pH responds. So I'm just going to start with a very small amount, that way it shouldn't change it too much, and I can add further pH up to amend it further. But if I do overshoot it, I can always put a bit of pH down in it to bring it back to a more reasonable level. So I'll put that in there, make sure the pipette is nicely rinsed out as well. You don't want to leave any residue of that in there. Give it a mix as well, leave it for a few minutes, see how that responds. So you can see there, it's already a good amount of change. So that's changed it from about 4.5 closer to 6. I'm going to add now half a milliliter. That should hopefully bring it into the 7 range, which will be optimum for this growing environment. So hopefully it's around about 7. Hopefully I haven't overshot. So around about 6.3. I could have pushed it a bit higher up, but as this nutrient solution says, its optimum is 5.8, and I'm happy with anywhere between probably 5.5 and 8 on the pH meter. 6.4 is absolutely fine. I'll just go ahead with that. If you want to be really precise, get the absolute best possible growth for your plants, you want to keep it in a really narrow window, but there's quite a bit of flexibility. You've got 1 or 2 pH points that you can go up and down. It won't cause a massive issue. You just won't get absolutely perfect nutrients absorption. So now what I can do is I can put this solution into the tray at the bottom here. I'm just going to fill it up. Now this isn't the final position I'm going to be having this in, so I'm not actually going to be plugging this in and checking the levels. But basically what I would do next is I would plug this in, I would check the levels, make sure that, as I said before, it flows over, but it's not too fast, not too slow. I'll just use an ordinary watering can just to give you an idea of what that would look like. So as you can see there, it's flowing through quite slowly. That's probably quite good. There's a couple of areas which are dry though, so I might want to make it actually slightly less steep. But at the same time I need to make sure at the bottom here it all flows over evenly. At the bottom there's several different holes where it can come out from in between those ridges. If it comes out of only one or two of these sections, it means further up here there might be stagnant sections. I want it to evenly flow out of the bottom there, just like a even waterfall. So I can adjust it for that, and if it's, as I say, only coming out one side or the other, it means it's not steep enough, or it's at the pitch that way is incorrect. Or if it's too steep and it will just flow right through, you'll have a path of water down the middle normally, and you'll have a big dry section. So you can see here towards the camera there's a bit that's dry. So you want to have it completely covered. I'm not doing that at all. So I'm going to sow the seeds now. What I'll be using is I'll be using this plastic. What you don't want is any light getting to the water, because the water is full of nutrients. It's at an optimum pH. Algae will absolutely love it, and if the algae is allowed to multiply, it'll absorb all the nutrients and upset the pH, and so the plants won't be able to grow well, and also they can release toxins which will damage the plants. So you want to keep that covered. This at the moment, the only bit the light can get in is the water in the bottom, but also all the water flowing on the top. So that's where this comes in. And this is just some cheap corrugated plastic that came with the kit that I've cut some holes in quite rudimentarily. As you can see, I haven't done a very neat job with it, but the spacing is about right for these plants, maybe a little bit close together, but it should work. And this just keeps it shaded. Once I put these plants in the holes, there won't be any light getting to the water, stops any algae problems. The only issue I do have with this is actually slightly too high for the cells that I'm using. So what you want is the cells to be touching the water, but there's a bit of a gap. To overcome that problem, what I have to do is water the plants from above until they're fully rooted, to make sure that the growing medium is kept nice and damp. Once they've rooted and the roots have gone down into this section, because there's 100% humidity in here, even if all the roots aren't in the water, they're not going to dry out, they're going to be fine. And actually the way that this comes out, this nozzle, it kind of splashes around in here, keeps them wet even if they're not sitting in the water. So that's not a problem for me. So I'm just going to get the cells ready. This kit, it just came like this. All I need to do is cut these out into individual sections and put them in that plastic frame there. So when it comes to putting in the seeds, basically my system came with a tray like this. I just had to cut out individual cells. That lets me put the individual cells into the growing tank. So when it comes to putting in the seeds, it can be a little bit tricky. Depends on the type of plant you've got, how big their seeds are. The seeds are quite small in these plants, but they're not as small as some seeds are. If they're really small seeds and they're like dust, you might need to use tweezers or some other kind of method of handling the seeds, because you can't really sow a large number of seeds. So for example, when you're growing in soil, you might just sow several seeds in a pot and then thin them out. It's a little bit more difficult in hydroponics, so ideally you just want to put one seed in. If it doesn't grow, put another seed in. You can put in 2 seeds, I suppose, but you don't want to put in lots. It's going to be a very small area. It's not like a pot of compost where they're spread out over the surface. These are all just congested in that one little hole. So all you want to do, just gently handle the seed. You can see you can see it on the camera, that seed there. Just want to carefully drop that in there, and that's what I need to do. So these need to be looked after carefully until the roots get established, especially on my system where the water isn't going to be touching the rock wall. I need to water them from above until the roots are established. So what I'm going to be doing is just very carefully watering them from the top, just like this, making sure that this is kept constantly damp. Now, fortunately, these seeds germinate within 2 or 3 days. They're very rapidly germinating seeds, these ones. Other plants might germinate a little bit slower. So I know with these, they'll germinate straight away, won't have any problems. So I just have to do this for a few days until the roots get established, and then it's just going to be fine. And then the ongoing care, these plants, they don't need grow lights. I've particularly chosen these because they don't need grow lights. They don't need high light levels. They're going to be here in my conservatory. There's going to be plenty of light for them. All I need to do is check the solution probably once a week, top it up when it needs topping up, and also check the pH level, keep that balanced around the 7 mark, or maybe slightly acidic, 6 level if it's depending on your growing mix. And then the other thing I need to do is just check the salt levels. Salt levels will go up and down. They generally tend to get more salty, more concentrated as the plants use up the water. Then when you top it up with more water, it becomes too diluted, so then you have to add some more solution. It's best to add a small amount. If it's too salty, All you can do to water it down is add more water. If your tank's already full, then you have to empty your tank and then put some more fresh water in. So adding a small amount at a time is the best way to go. You don't want to add too much because it's a lot easier to add more than it is to take any of it away. And that's pretty much it. If it's very hot and sunny and they're really thirsty plants, you'll obviously need to check your solution more often. This is a large tank. These plants, until summertime at least, it's going to be spring, so they're not going to be too thirsty. Once a week is probably okay for me. But in the height of summer, if you have a smaller tank, or you have a slightly different hydroponic system, you'll probably need to check your hydroponic solution every single day, especially if they're growing quickly. So that's all for this video, just to give you guys a quick look at how I do my hydroponics. I'll maybe give you guys an update either at the end of this video or in another video to show you how these are growing. So it's now 3 months later, and I'd like to show you how the plants look after several months of growth. If you've got your own hydroponic system, you can probably expect even better results than this. I was growing this in February, March when the light levels were quite low here in Scotland. So for the first few months the temperatures were quite low and the light levels weren't great, so these grew quite slowly. The last 2 months though, this has put on a huge amount of growth and grown very well. The other thing is I wasn't too on top of the feed levels and the concentrations, so as you can see with these, some of these older leaves are showing slight deficiency. That's a few weeks ago or months ago when I wasn't checking on it too often. And in the last few weeks I've been quite good with adding the correct amount of feed and making sure it's at the right levels of pH. And so you can see the new leaves are coming through really nice and green, much darker green, much healthier look to them. So if you do look after your plants well, you'll get a much better crop. These now have got a huge amount of leaves, they're quite robust plants. I'm going to be harvesting them probably 2 or 3 times a week. I find with these Chinese cabbages, when they're grown hydroponically or even in the garden in a rich soil, you can harvest them several times a week in the middle of summer when you've got plenty of light and warmth, and they just keep cropping more and more leaves. You just remove some of the older leaves and you've got new leaves constantly replaced in the middle of the plant. They really are fast growing plants and give you a really good yield of leaves. So that's all for this hydroponic video. I just wanted to show you how I set up my hydroponic system. As I say, there's lots of different ways of doing hydroponics. This isn't necessarily the best way, but it's also quite a simple method. It's one that I use and I seem to be getting quite good results.